about, nor will even watch. Don't even know why I bother, when most people only care about is the pretty colors and clickbait thumbnails and videos full of big words that basically tell you that 2 plus 2 equals 4. So in case you do care, the series that I'll be reviewing today will be Gate, aka the show where the Japanese army invades a fantasy world and shit happens. So my first impression of the series was, okay, so we've got modern Japan meets this fantasy world with the help of a mysterious and magical interdimensional gate that just appears out of nowhere. You know, it sounds interesting enough. It's kind of like a reverse isekai, and I think the idea of two worlds coming together and interacting seems cool enough. Also, because the series is regarded as the best anime ever because of Japanese nationalism, while also being the worst anime ever because split screens.
And this is where we get to Gate. I think the show's use of the split screen is very intriguing, but I don't think it's meaningful to recall any classical use of paneling. There's a fantastic review by Banjo the Bear where he briefly posits reasons as to why the split screens of Gate are used. The first is that it foregrounds the visual style. The second is that it replicates the feeling of the news. And the third is that it creates a sense of disparity, accentuating conflict and difference. These are all incredibly valid reasons as to why Gate uses the split screen, and for many parts that's actually true. Conversations that are split screen oftentimes focus on contrast, honing in on the reactions of the people compared to others, but it's not always, and I think further abstraction of Gate's use of the split screen can give us a little bit more of a higher concept. After all, it's hard to find what and where the split screen has changed in modern day cinema, since its use has evolved as the medium that depicts visual media evolved. In fact, if we recall Manovich's work, we can find a medium where the split screen reigns supreme.
So clearly it's gonna catch my interest if it has a reputation like that, and also because I enjoy series about war alongside other things, you know, I'm bound to pick up the series anyway, eventually. So, story. So Gate, or its full name in English, Gate, thus the Japanese Self-Defense Force Fought There. Where do I start with this series? Because, oh god, this is quite a clusterfuck. So, when a magic interdimensional portal opens up in Japan, hordes of fantasy warriors and monsters pour out and attack the people of Japan. And of course, it's Japan that gets all the fun shit happening in it, with one man standing in their way, a Japanese soldier named Itami, who managed to lead a counter-defense in order to push the intruders back, which actually works, even though anyone with half a brain could have come up with it. I mean, for fuck's sakes, the people they're fighting are armed with medieval weapons, and there are a few monsters with them, which can be killed quite quickly with enough gunfire and missiles pointed in their general direction. It's really funny how easy that works. Sometime after the attack, he is apparently a hero now, and promoted in the army. So, after that, he is deployed as the first squadron of the Japanese army to explore this new land and etc. The story of Gate pretty much starts out as this war between the Japanese army versus the Empire, which is totally not a cheap ripoff of the Roman Empire, minus Julius Caesar and all the badass history and wars, which I thought was a pretty interesting idea for a war, because you've got modern combat with guns and tanks versus fantasy, which could make for some very interesting battles going down. And while this war is going down, will we have people from both sides trying to stop the war so the two worlds can coexist with peace? Stop the war, please! Sounds pretty cool, right? Well, if you think that's what the storyline is going to be, then I'm sorry to tell you that you are wrong. Dead wrong. Because Gate is otaku pandering and Japanese propaganda to the max. And I am not joking when I say this. The underlying for the otaku pandering part, you've got a fantasy world filled with most of the otaku fetishes like lollies, elves, animal girls, and etc. It also includes the main protagonist as an otaku, who is a hero to the people, and has been starting to collect girls for his harem, including tons of fan service, which, if you like fan service, then, you know, it's not that bad, because it basically covers every vanilla fetish under the sun, you damn mouth breathers. For the Japanese propaganda part, you've got leaders of America, China, and Russia acting like one-dimensional evil villains, who want to take over the fantasy world and mine it for natural resources, for money, and etc., while the clearly noble Japanese government want to protect the fantasy people from those who would have evil intentions, like America, China, and Russia. Another example of this propaganda is Black Ops, who probably have had years of combat experience. Granted, the Japanese troops had a killer goth lolly on their side, but it's a little ridiculous for regular rank and file to get a drop on elite Black Ops forces. Clearly these Americans were no mite for the mighty Japanese. I get it, Japan, you're still salty about World War II, but you have to get over it. The Japanese army isn't as strong as it used to be, and you have to understand that. Also, I would like to add that any country would probably do the same thing if a new land popped up and it was full of untapped resources.
Bunch of new age nonsense. What happened to the good old days where Japanese students would graduate high school, join the military, and then invade Manchuria?
So Gate had the potential to be a good war drama, and if it had taken itself seriously, it could have been good. But sadly, it decided to take the safe route and become a soulless, otaku pandering wish fulfillment bullshit with a war thrown in as flavoring. And when I think about this, it could have been a pretty decent harem if it wasn't for the war and the badly explored politics. Hell, it could have been a decent adventure story if you, again, remove the war and politics. You know, when I think about it, the war and political elements really do drag it down the mud, because this could have been a fun story with harem and ecchi shit happening, and it probably would have been a 10 times better show, and that's saying something, and it doesn't help that the political elements are ham-fisted at best, and incredibly biased, because if you're not Japanese, you're not a noble or kind-hearted person. Now, of course, the people who have been listening to this point will point out that it isn't a war drama, and me complaining about it is rather pointless and missing the point of the series, because for all intents and purposes, it's just a series about an army man fucking around in the fantasy world, and it doesn't have to be more than that, which is true, but I feel that Gate could have been good. It could have been the next Outbreak Company, with more grittiness and being more serious, because Outbreak Company isn't the best, and even though it's pretty much otaku pandering crap as well, but what that series talked about and the twist at the end, and by the way, spoilers, was very intriguing and real. Like the idea of subverting and taking over the local culture by way of using otaku culture and basically taking over a kingdom so you can mine it for resources and shit. That is scary and real, and it happens in real life. Like a certain religion of peace undermining Western values and culture. If Gate went into more details than it did of how the Japanese government or other countries of the earth have affected this fantasy world. Because in the series, we don't see mini markets pop up with new technology, we don't see like a tech boom starting, and we don't really see the importing much of different ideas. And we definitely don't see the long-term effects of, us, applying our culture and beliefs to a society where gods and demons and all sorts of shit are real. Like, we don't see the long-term effects because, the series is also incomplete. But, the only thing that kind of changes so far is that demi-humans, elves, and etc. are treated better by the people of Earth, because probably in our pulp culture, we view these types of beings in a more positive life than, for example, the fantasy people who are kind of racist and, products of their time, essentially. So, Gate's story in a nutshell is bullshit happens, and it could have been better written than it is, but it exists, and there's some basement dweller enjoyment you could probably get out of it, but I wouldn't hold my breath.
Gate's subject matter is one that's covered in a lot of Japanese media and studies. Nationalist rhetoric and semiotics have been in Japanese manga and anime for a very long time. For instance, consider Hajime no Ippo's 408th chapter, which frames the characters as pilots. I think Matthew Penny puts it as clearly as possible. The Boxers were not pilots. They did not fight in the war, and Japan had no air power early in the occupation, all aircraft having been destroyed following the surrender. This is a fantasy image, included at the beginning of a chapter, and has nothing to do with the narrative. It very clearly, however, relates a vaguely conceived war with post-war acts of defending Japanese honor. And this intertwining of honor, identity, and war in Japan is something Gate attempts to tackle. After all, its successful repelling of foreign special forces argues that Japan is capable of defending itself and doesn't need America's security umbrella. Yanagita's questioning of the world's resources and Itami's job to go out and find resources is recollective of Japan's imperialistic rhetoric, reframed as something necessary, but also benign. The slimy behavior of anti-JSDF politicians and reporters personify the anti-war attitude that's challenged a push for force projection. And it's no surprise that Gate foregrounds two countries, the first being America, the country that's been Japan's major post-war security benefactor, but also the major actor in its quote-unquote military neutering, and the second being China, the country that's been encroaching on what the Japanese have always considered their East Asian regional hegemony, as evidenced in the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands incident, as big political antagonists. That's sort of the interesting part of Gate. It doesn't bring anything new to the literature of Japanese nationalism, but there is a considerable amount in what I believe is an attempt to foreground traditional nationalist narratives into a modern visual grammar. Gates' messages are intertwined with technologies that are reflective of a modern system, and this reconfiguration may be an attempt to stress how these concerns are still relevant to the country today, that they aren't bygone debates of bygone eras. And while I don't agree with the messages it supports, and I don't think it's doing it as well as it should, I can respect it for what I believe to be an incrementally explorative attempt by an otherwise really lackluster show to drag really conservative ideas into a new media.
Now, when it comes to characters, the main character, Itami, is the most out-of-place thing in a setting. He's pretty much an lazy otaku slacker with a pretty decent ranking in the military. I understand that anyone can have a hobby that's outside their workplace, but I would think that if he was a soldier for the army, he would be a lot more fit, or in fact more highly trained, considering the fact that he's also part of the Japanese Black Ops. And how did he get there exactly? By being lazy as fuck. Like, holy shit, they really don't have any standards, do they? Now, I will say that his backstory is a bit more intriguing with his mother, who basically gone batshit insane because her husband would beat her up in basically abusive relationship, and one day she snapped and killed him in self-defense. Which leads to some very fucked up things going on, like going crazy, not accepting reality, and trying to kill herself. Even though I feel that this reveal was a bit out of left field, I do feel it explains a lot why Itami is so laid back and rather kind, because when you go through shit like that, and like a lot of things lose impact and shock value to you, and you don't want people to go through the same things. So it kind of, I think knowing that about him kind of explains why he's kind of just blasé about things. It's like, eh. Now, for the side characters, are very one note and are bland as toast, except for Rory and Tuka, who made the series for me. Rory because killer lolly with giant halberd killing people like ants, which is pretty funny at times, and Tuka because I found her PTSD over the dragon attack and losing her father was intriguing, and also ties into with the main character and the thing he had with his mother, because Tuka, like his mother, is becoming delusional and not facing reality, which is quite a funny message coming from this show, because the series up to that point has been otaku pandering or Japanese militarism fan service for God knows who. Most of the other characters are either stupid or forgettable. Even the military leaders who are in charge are, the word stupid doesn't cover it. It's more like incompetent. So incompetent, in fact, that it boggles my mind to why they haven't been overthrown yet. There's not even a single character I care about in this entire show. There's not much of character development, although there's a tad more fleshing out with certain characters, like Princess Pina, who one of the few people who realizes that fighting Japan or the nations of Earth is very foolish. Unlike her brother Zorzal, who's like Gilgamesh from Fate Stay Night, except without the ability to back up his boasts and bites off way more than he can chew. Another problem I have with the cast as a whole is that even though they're involved with a lot of fighting and shit, and they're involved like a lot of stressful situations, like none of them suffer PTSD or feel guilt for killing people. Like, nothing really seems to affect them. Not one character, say especially from the Japanese army, is affected. Like, you know, not like what is, like, none of the people from the Japanese side, like, what all this fighting is doing to us, or, you know, how do they feel when they just kill entire armies in mere seconds? I mean, they just feel like robots sometimes. It's like, shoot, point, shoot, repeat, point, shoot, repeat, point, shoot, repeat. But on the flip side, it's more reasonable for the people from the fantasy world to be more like that, because death and fighting are more common for them. Like, the only dude who comments on it is Itami, and that's saying something, even though he's very blasé about the whole situation. It's just like, yeah, we're like killing bandits by the fucking truckloads of our helicopters and our trucks and missiles, you know, don't care. You know, I don't feel bad for these people. Pff, who cares? They're not part of the mighty Japanese race. Now, when it comes to the art, the animation is very average as a whole. It does have some very colourful backgrounds to do, which fit nicely with the setting. And another note is that everything looks very shiny. A bit too shiny, especially when they're like driving through mud or getting like down and dirty and fighting. Also, for some reason, this series has an odd habit of zooming in when guns are being fired, or in one case having a helicopter minigun zoomed up really close. Like, basically there's like a helicopter minigun and they zoom in really close to it, and the whole screen is basically just the helicopter minigun, and it's just firing into a group of bandits. The art style is very generic, even for shit based on light novels. Also, most of the things, like most of the character designs, look like they were copy and pasted from other fantasy worlds and possibly a few hentai, because of reasons. Now, I do like some of the character designs, like, not that they're amazing or mind-blowing in a way, I just thought, like, Rory looked cool in some of the costumes that the elves wore, or some of the outfits they wore looked, they looked cool. So, when it comes to the sounds, The opening and ending songs I don't care about in the least, and the biggest sin is that the music and lyrics are so upbeat, almost epic at times, even though people are getting killed en masse in the show and other serious things going on, like the PTSD and etc. this series likes to spring on its viewers. It doesn't fit very well and gives off this feeling of just complete tonal whiplash. It's just like, oh my god, someone's died! And then the ending credits come in and it's just like this really cheery, upbeat song, and it's just like, what the fuck? Now, the OST was fine for the most part. Well, nothing that really got my interest. I did feel it did an okay job. It was done by Yoshikai Fujiwara, who has done the OST for such series as Akane no Riddle and quite a few of the Love Life series. Sub and dub are both okay by my standards, and I feel that the voice actors for both sub and dub do an adequate job, and I'm not really much of a dub or sub fag, so I don't really care. Now, when it comes to enjoyment, so overall, despite being quite negative towards the show in general, I did find it quite entertaining at times. Like, for example, when the Empire tried to attack the Japanese base and the army just got fucking wrecked and destroyed almost instantly, which I found funny because the Empire's army was so cocky and thinking they were going to win with numbers, and then seeing them getting ripped apart with gunfire. Like, that was my favorite part, and it just got better and better when they did it a few more times with a bigger army each time. That still got ripped apart just as easily. Those episodes are probably the most fun I've ever had with this anime, and sadly it never goes back to the quality that those episodes had, even though there were a few others that made me laugh a little or I quite enjoyed. Like, for example, I like the episode where Itami and his harem goes to Japan and like explores and sees technology and gets new outfits and stuff. I thought that was pretty cool. Like, they experienced a tiny bit of like culture shock, a tiny bit, which I thought was interesting. So overall, if you like simple shows with fan service and fantasy elements, then Gate will be the anime for you. But if you're looking for a war drama that takes itself seriously, then you won't find it here, along with other things like grey logic or grey characters. Also, if this was supposed to be some sort of like advertisement for the Japanese army, then it's an even fail at that. So yeah, enjoyable trash is all I need to say about that. So, before I leave, I just want to give a quick message. Now, originally I was going to be doing D&D Ethno State Crusader shortly, but due to unforeseen circumstances, the DM has that's kind of going on hold for now. So hopefully I will be able to get a D&D game out eventually, or like some sort of roleplay game, or we'll do like D&D Ethno State Crusaders like later on. But I just wanted to give people a heads up just in case if you were excited for that, because at the moment it's might not happen, but you know, we'll see what happens. It's just some background shit. So this is Bio Gundam. Thank you for watching, and see you later.